Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to Bring On the Bad Guys, the show where we take a look at the most villainous and nefarious characters from, right now, just Marvel Comics, but who knows, we may expand the universe a little bit someday, which is kind of what we're doing today, actually, in that we are expanding a little bit back in time to the 1950s and very early 1960s, just as Marvel was getting off the ground. And of course, before Marvel existed, they were known as Atlas. Before that, it was Timely. So today we're looking at Marvel monsters from the 50s, so the Atlas time period, and also the very, very early Marvel time period before the superheroes were really Exhibit A in the Marvel Universe. So, that all being said, we're going to kick it off right away. We're going to go to number 10 here on our list. And also, number 10 happens to be one of my favorite characters on this list. He is Trel, sometimes known as Trel the Inhuman. And if you think that you somehow stumbled across an evil version of Mike Mulligan's Steam Shovel, you may be partially correct. So, Trel first appeared in Tales to Astonish number 21 in July of 1961, and he hails originally from the Delta Centaurus galaxy. He was created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, and now we come to the power scale, which we're going to review super fast. 5 categories, 5 points possible in each category. The higher your score, the more nefarious / greater of a villain you are. So Trel ranks 3 for personality, 2 for powers, 2 for mythology, 3 for design, and 1 for cultural impact. And just to explain these categories really quick, personality, powers, and design, all straightforward. Mythology is everything that happens in the pages of the comics. Cultural impact is everything that happens off the pages of the comic. So video games, animated shows, movies, live action, random poetry readings. Just kidding, that doesn't really happen. But those kind of things all contribute to cultural impact. So Trel, as many of these villains, comes from outer space, and he actually crashed in Africa, and his physical body died. His spirit, he decided to transfer to something he thought was a very powerful entity close by. It was a brand new model of steam shovel. And imagine a sentient steam shovel taking you hostage. And that's what happened to a couple people in Africa. And Trel decided, I'm going to start right here, take over this planet. I'm in this very powerful form. Again, steam shovel form. And actually, quick side note, a lot of these characters came in tied for 10th place, so I got to choose my favorite, which also happens to be the quirkiest ones. So we're going to get some quirky ones here, at least at the beginning. And as often happens with early Marvel monster tales, he is taken down, not by superheroes, but everyday people. His Trel spirit escapes into the African wilderness and shows up years later in, wouldn't you know it, New York City in another shovel. And he actually recruits an army of sentient, smaller construction equipment and once again tries to take over the world. Once again, doesn't work, and Trel was actually rehabilitated into the Damage Control organization, which is the organization in Marvel that cleans up after superhero and villain battles. And so Trel is now, Trel spent time as their spokesperson and as a member of Damage Control, helping clean up after villainous battles. So Trel has only appeared 8 or 9 times, but very kooky, very fun character, and who wouldn't want to see a sentient piece of construction equipment on the big screen someday? Maybe quite a few people, but I would not be among them. Moving to number 9, which actually sounds like more of a drink than a monster, we have Grog. And Grog is a space dragon, but we don't quite know where he's from. There are theories going around that he is of the same species as another very famous Marvel space dragon, who we will talk about later on this list. He was discovered in Russia and unearthed as he was sleeping, which is never a good thing to do to a dragon. And there were nuclear tests and other experiments going on in the mountain range where Grog was napping, woke him up, and the Russians had a heck of a time getting him under control. Finally, they were able to lure him onto a spacecraft and shoot him away towards Mars. However, later on, the Collector, who we've seen in Guardians of the Galaxy movies, was able to get a hold of Grog, somehow bring him back to Earth, and keep him captured in Canada. And this is a similar story that you'll hear with quite a few of the other characters. We have people like the Fantastic Four, the Hulk, Spider-Man, the X-Men, the Avengers having to deal with monsters as they sometimes kind of randomly appear around the world. Canada, Monster Island, different places. So Grog is one of those. He was last seen as a member of S.H.I.E.L.D. And as you see in the picture here, he's got some metal stuff going on. He was actually serving as the S.H.I.E.L.D. helicarrier. So he flies around. He's that big of a creature that they're able to build a helicarrier on top of him. And Grog, as you can see, doesn't talk, so his first line is roar, because he roars, breathes fire. Of course, a space dragon would do those things. He first appeared in Strange Tales number 83 in April of 1961. We don't quite know where he came from again. He was created by Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, and Dick Ayers. Personality 1, again, doesn't talk, just attacks, breathes fire, nasty guy. Powers 3, just because he's so huge, but he is more of an animal and not a processing, thinking creature. So he doesn't get to be above a 3 on that. Mythology 2, again, some fun, usually just monster-related stories. So he doesn't really get that much of a kick in the mythology department. Design 3, space dragons are just generally cool, even if they only appeared a few times and don't have everything all the way fleshed out. Cultural impact is also a 2. Grog's also immortal. That's kind of a important part, and he will probably be around for quite a while. So that is Grog. Number 8, not 3, third one, but number 8 is Electro, and no, not the same Electro as the Spider-Man villain. This Electro was a sentient robot, of course, got away from his creator and started to terrorize the city and wanted to become grand dictator of the planet Earth. Eventually, his creator and his creator's assistants found the weaknesses that were able to bring Electro down and lead him to crash, stumble, fall, and sink into a nearby river, where he was unearthed by the Fantastic Four a few years later. He initially resumed his previous programming, but Mr. Fantastic and company were able to defuse that and turn him into a good guy, who then developed a crush on another robot at the Baxter Building, and they went on a few dates. So, robot romance, thanks to the Fantastic Four turning Electro into a good guy. Of course, they tried to differentiate him as Electro 1 after the Spider-Man villain came about to existence. His first appearance was in Tales of Suspense number 13 in January of 1961. Place of origin, the U.S., that's where he was built. He was created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. His personality is a 2, because he's a robot, so everything is kind of programmed into him. Powers 3, you can tell from this picture he was once a giant robot, and now he is more reduced to kind of standard human size. So he only gets a 3 as far as powers go. Mythology 2, and it would probably sit at 1 if not for the fun Fantastic Four story later on. So that bumps him up to a 2. Design 3. Early designs weren't incredibly gracious to him, but the later revamped designs when he appears with the Fantastic Four are a bit more fun. So he gets a 3 for that. Cultural impact 1, as Electro has not appeared not appeared outside comic book pages. Another personal favorite is next at number 7. It is Spragg. And he was first billed in Journey into Mystery 68 in May 1961 as Spragg, the mountain that walks like a man. Now, we didn't quite see Spragg walk a lot, either in that comic or since, but he is a mountain that acts like a man because he wants to take over the world. And he's an alien, so easy fitting in this lineup of dastardly evildoers. His place of origin is the planet of the Hill People, which we don't really have a name for, at least at this point in town. In town? This point in time is what I meant to say. He was created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. His personality sits at 2. He is pretty one-dimensional in his thought. People must build for him what he then will use to take over the world. One-dimensional, no matter who he's fighting and taking on. Nothing too crazy about that. Powers is, his ranking for powers is a 3. And he has a decent level of psychic and telekinetic ability. And he can somewhat morph his shape and send out sort of humanoid avatars of himself, much like Ego did in Guardians of the Galaxy 2. And he can also animate dirt and earth to form, again, humanoids or basically whatever he can think of. The disadvantage to his powers are that he doesn't really have the ability to walk. He just has to kind of morph and flow through the earth. And the only way he could possibly walk is if he were to try to reshape himself as a human and legs and such, and that would end up being a little clunky in the transportation department. His mythology is a 3. His first story is actually really well done. You'd think that a giant hill that could eat people is cheesy, and you'd be right. But it's a very fun occasion when Lee and Kirby in the early days, and really any of the writers, can really make a monster story creepy. And they did a good job with Spragg's origin, especially since it took place in Transylvania, as all good horror stories do. But Spragg's backstory is that he and his fellow hill people, as they are called, became trapped inside the planet Earth and mixed with the core. So this was obviously millions of years ago. And were left as psychic mental entities that could also form mounds of rock and move throughout the different levels of the Earth's crust. So Spragg was not popular among these people and was exiled. So then he popped up to the surface of the Earth in Transylvania and was flung into outer space eventually by the villagers who finally figured out what his scheme was. And a lot of these monsters tend to get thrown into outer space because in the early days there wasn't a whole lot of other places to put them. A few years later, Spragg also fought against the Mole Man and She-Hulk. Got sent out by his fellow hill people, actually, back to outer space. Was able to come back and fight some other monster-type wars with the people of Earth and the heroes of Earth later on. But didn't really do too much past that. Design 2, again, he's a giant hill, but he's a really evil-looking giant hill. So he gets that going for him. Cultural impact is a 1 because, again, he's never appeared outside of the pages of a comic book. Moving on to number 6, we have Goon. And Goon is one of the fun names to say on this list. They're all fun. He was created by Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, and Dick Ayers, and first appeared in Tales of Suspense number 15 in March 1961. He's from Planet X, which was a very popular planet for alien beings to come from in the early Marvel and Atlas days. His personality sits at a 2 because, again, focused on the whole destroy, conquer aspect of life, doesn't give you a very well-rounded personality. Powers 3, big guy, has some mental communication powers, and is an expert in navigating and using his advanced alien technology. His design is I skipped mythology. Mythology is 2. He is similar to a lot of Marvel monsters in that he invades Earth, gets beaten by humans, and then shows up again when there is some sort of monster event. So we mentioned the Collector collecting a bunch of these aliens and keeping them in a monster zoo. Goon was one of them. He later shows up on Monster Isle, fights a few other monsters, kind of stereotypical monster lore. He does end up getting a 2 in mythology rather than a 1 because he actually is the father of Gugam, who is another Marvel villain, and he, of course, comes into Earth's atmosphere thanks to his father's interest in the planet. Design 2, he looks almost juvenile in some takes, and that kind of belies his intelligence, but we'll give him a 2 instead of a 1 on that, because it still is an awesome Jack Kirby design monster. Cultural impact is a 2, and he actually showed up in an episode of the animated TV show Hulk and the Agents of Smash, and he is actually in this show a female and is without mental powers. Basically kind of a wild animal with the ability to breathe fire and ice and other nasty things. So he was a villain in Hulk and the Agents of Smash, and that's pretty much all that he's done off the pages of the comic books. Next, we have another one of my personal favorites. At number 5, we have Orgo, who first appeared in the pages of Strange Tales number 90, way back in November of 1961. And we don't have a specific name for his planet, but my best guess is that it is Mentelleron, because Orgo has been referred to as a Mentellarite. And the reason for that will be forthcoming here in a second. Created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, another classic Kirby monster. Personality 2. Similar to other monsters in that he is a would-be conqueror and underestimates the people of Earth. Mythology sits at a 2. I skipped powers, going back. Powers, monster, super strong, super strength. The mental powers are where he gets his race name and probably planet name. He has very significant mental powers, so telepathy, telekinesis, can alter reality in some sense or warp it, and he also has a form of super breath and potentially some freezing abilities, although they may be tied into his mental powers as well. So that's a 3 for Orgo. Mythology 2, very similar to other monster stories. Although Orgo's begins, he is one of a handful of extraterrestrials who are trying to decide if they should conquer Earth or not. And Orgo decides, along with his fellow conquerors, that the people of Earth will be conquered pretty easily, so they only need to send one, and they send Orgo. So Orgo comes to Earth, fights them, actually takes over the world, and fools the planet into thinking that they had won. However, Orgo would later be defeated by a circus gorilla because the circus gorilla realized he wasn't being fed by his masters because they were all under Orgo's control. So Jojo, the gorilla, actually defeated Orgo. Orgo left the planet, mind-wiped the human race, and was embarrassed to be defeated by a monkey. So Orgo doesn't really talk about it that much, as you can probably guess. Later on, he was a member of S.H.I.E.L.D., and he appeared in the Avengers Standoff storyline, which was a S.H.I.E.L.D. based story. And those are all kind of standard monster stories. Every once in a while, Marvel, as they should, wants to have a big monster event, and they bring back a lot of the classic Marvel monsters. And Orgo's one of them. So he was last seen, or close to being last seen, helping Old Man Logan rescue Jubilee from Dracula. That was a few years ago. He also appeared in the Monsters Unleashed storyline. And his design is a 2. He's kind of a lump, although the eyes give him a kind of eerie appearance, but he gets a design of a 2. Design rank of 2. Cultural impact 3, in that he shows up in Marvel Avengers Academy, the video game, and he is a big part of that game, and it's kind of become a fan favorite based on that game and his other weird appearances. So cultural impact 3 for Orgo, giving him 12 total. Going to number 5, we have a little bit more of complicated villains, which is a good thing for this list. We have the Hulk. Just kidding. I mean, kind of kidding. Also, not all the way kidding. So, Xemnu was the first character in the Marvel Universe to be called the Hulk. He was called the Living Hulk as he appeared in Journey into Mystery number 62, which was in November 1960. We're not sure where his original origin is, although he came to Earth from an exile world where he was a prisoner, and he was able to sneak onto a ship and abscond with it and fly it to crash land on Earth. He was created by Stan Lee, Larry Lieber, and Jack Kirby. His personality is a 2. Again, the whole alien monster conquering Earth thing comes into play. Powers are a 3, and although you would look at him in this picture and say, yeah, he must have super strength, he must have superpowers, he must be a very tough hand-to-hand combatant, those are all true. However, he also has advanced hypnotic powers and can actually take over planets with his mental capabilities as far as keeping their mental capacities under his control. Mythology is a 3, and he started off as one of the few villains to appear a second time in the early days of Marvel. So, mental control over the human race being achieved, Xemnu was then trying to transform some machinery on Earth to a bigger spaceship that could bring him home. The spaceship was going to cause some pretty severe consequences for the planet in that it would probably make it unable to support life. So the one person that Xemnu left out of mental control was the person that had actually saved Xemnu after he had crashed in the planet, and not wanting to see his planet destroyed, this individual was able to thwart Xemnu's scheme by mixing up the wires in the spaceship. So Xemnu was then expelled and left the planet Earth. A few years later, he would return, and that was still right as Marvel was getting started. So Xemnu was one of the first people or monsters of any sort to return and fight the planet again before superheroes were even in the picture. He has very recently appeared in the pages of Immortal Hulk, and that's a very fun read if you're interested in that. When I say recent, I mean within the last few months. And some really cool Alex Ross covers on that mini run with Xemnu in it, and this picture here is actually one of those covers. So, fun character, fun artwork, and now, of course, known as Xemnu only, and not the Hulk, after the Hulk was actually created as a hero, of course. Other fun fact about Xemnu is that originally he was brown in color, and then when he came back after his appearances in Journey into Mystery were reprinted, he was colored white, and ever since then he's been colored white. So not exactly sure why that is the case, but there you have it, brown to white fur. Number 3, we have the Zombie. And you might think that's a really lame and unoriginal name, and that's kind of true. But the reason that it wasn't given, when I say it, I mean the Zombie, wasn't given a more proper name is because he appeared way back in Menace number 5, which was in July 1953, and he was the dead body of Simon Garth. And as was the case in most of the stories in Menace and other comic magazines like Menace at the time, there really wasn't any bringing back the characters. So he didn't really get a name at all in Menace, except there's the Zombie. That's a zombie. He's under someone's control. You can see by the amulet around his neck, he has to respond and obey the living person wearing the matching amulet. Not that you could tell by the amulet that was not the inference. But his place of origin was Birmingham, Alabama in the United States. And to just finish off the story about his name, he, again, didn't have a name to begin with. And then in the mid-70s, when Marvel started printing more monster books, they started up Tales of the Zombie based on this character, including this character of Simon Garth's Zombie. And they just stuck with it, Tales of the Zombie, nothing special. So that's what he's known as, Simon Garth, the Zombie. And it was one of the first black and white horror comic magazines that Marvel published in the early 70s when they started to get into more horror involving vampires and werewolves, which had been against the comics code. And then they also started to get into voodoo and zombies and stuff like that. He was created by Stan Lee and Bill Everett, again, way back in the 50s. His personality is a 2, and very barely a 2. Usually it's a 1 because he's unliving, unthinking, and just obeys, for the most part, the person with the matching amulet. However, there is a little bit of consciousness in him that can rebel. For instance, if he is told to attack one of his friends, sometimes there's enough remnant of a human being in his mind to prevent him from doing that. He has appeared back as a human every once in a while, and so his personality gets a slight knock up there. Powers are 3, and you might think, well, why would a zombie have powers? And part of those powers is basically that he can't die because he's a zombie. He also has superhuman strength, and he can heal from injuries. So I don't know if you can really call them injuries because he's dead, but part of the zombie-ism is that he can regenerate. So very hard to actually put down, even though he's already dead. So Mythology 3, again, one of the very early, along with Dracula and Frankenstein, 70s Marvel monsters to come up and get his own magazine. And then, of course, there would be Ghost Rider and Blade and Werewolf by Night, other monsters that would come along as well. Design is a 3. Just the classic zombie, long black hair, pale skin, Classic zombie look, so he gets a 3 for that. Cultural impact is a 3 as well. And he's been seen in the pages of some of the Marvel Zombies comics, and Marvel Zombies has a huge following, and that is a partial reason why the cultural impact for the zombie gets up to 3, and just because he paved the way for a lot of other horror characters. Not on his own. Again, Dracula, Frankenstein, Werewolf, Ghost Rider also did their part, but really the first zombie in comics that was the focus of his own stories. And that's Simon Garth. And he's had actually more than one miniseries throughout the years, too, where they have revisited his story. So you're free to check those out as well. Number 2, I want to say like every character on this list is one of my favorites because it's true. Fin Fang Foom. And this is a name that I loved saying when I was a kid and still love saying. So Fin Fang Foom first appeared in Strange Tales number 89 in October of 1961. And speaking of liking to say things, man, his place of origin, quite a mouthful. So we're going to give it a go. I believe it's pronounced Kakaranthara. Kakaranthara. That is my best guess on his home planet's name. He was created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. Personality 3. He has some super fun stories, so we'll get into that a little bit as we kind of get into the stories a little bit more. Powers 4. Again, giant dragon, superhuman strength, can fly super fast thanks to his wings, acid breath, telepathy, super intelligent creature, and a master of his own culture's alien technology. So, a lot to work with for Mr. Fin Fang Foom. Mythology 4, again, we'll kind of summarize the personality and mythology all together at the same time. Design 4. Not only does Fin Fang Foom's design explain in the Marvel Universe where the idea for Chinese dragons came from, he's just really I don't want to call him the zenith or the zenith, however you like to say that. I've heard both people say it, or I've heard people say it both ways. I've heard it both ways. Sean Spencer would say that. And classic Jack Kirby design. And I'm biased. Designs for one of my favorite Marvel designs is Fin Fang Foom. Cultural impact is a 3. And we've seen him a lot on animated shows. In the 90s Iron Man cartoon, he was a recurring character. He also appeared in Iron Man Armored Adventures and the Superhero Squad show, Hulk and the Agents of Smash, Ultimate Spider-Man, Avengers Assemble, Guardians of the Galaxy. He also showed up in Marvel Disc Wars for one episode. He was in the animated film Invincible Iron Man. That was a direct-to-video film. And he has shown up in a bunch of video games as well. He's one of the first bosses you fight in Marvel Ultimate Alliance. He is a playable character in the Lego Marvel Avengers game and a villain character in Marvel Superhero Squad Online. So one of the more famous monsters on this list, as would be indicated by the high ranking on this list. So here's the quick summary of why his personality and mythology rank, at 3 and 4. Fin Fang Foom. So Stan Lee said that I think this was an interview in 2000, in the 2000s at some point, and Stan Lee said that there was a movie that he liked called Chu Chin Chow, and it was an adaptation, I believe, of a play. But that name stuck in Stan Lee's head, and he was trying to come up with a name for this dragon. And he goes, Chu Chin Chow. Oh, so that kind of led him to Fin Fang Foom. That's Stan Lee's take on it. I'm not going to argue with him. Fin Fang Foom in his native tongue means he whose limbs shatter mountains and whose back scrapes the sun. So possibly the coolest name out of all Marvel villains. Possibly because of his fun to say name, but Fin Fang Foom has showed up in monster stories that have lended themselves to be more humorous. So it turns out, for example, that Fin Fang Foom loves cooking and wants to have his own restaurant, which actually is shown in one of the Lego Marvel Superheroes games as well. So I'm not going to get into everything here, but he interacts with a lot of Marvel's crazier characters. Gwenpool, Howard the Duck, Nightmare, the other monsters, and he also actually even shows up against the Midgard Serpent, which is really fun, like two mythologies colliding. So he gets a total of 18 points, and that is Fin Fang Foom. Oh, I forgot to mention, there's an Easter egg of Fin Fang Foom in the very first Iron Man movie. There's a picture of him downtown that you can see in the background when Iron Man and Ironmonger are fighting towards the end of the movie. But he has not appeared officially in the MCU. And speaking of the MCU, that takes us to number one, the only Groot. And you might be surprised to discover that Groot did actually start out as a villain, we think. More on that in a second. He first appeared in Tales to Astonish number 13 in November of 1960. He also came from a place called Planet X, although later that was abridged to be the planet Telunia. And he was created by Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, and Larry Lieber. So Groot gets a personality of 3, and a lot of this stuff you probably already know because you've seen the movies if you're watching this, but Groot is not necessarily the greatest personality in the world, even though he is a super awesome character. Powers 3, and Groot has some capacity for super strength in that he can alter his body in order to make himself lift more. He can create weaponry with his limbs and fingers and such. He works with Rocket Raccoon, of course, most of the time, and is more of a muscle to Rocket's intelligence. And basically anything a plant can do, Groot can do, but he can think and interact with other people, of course. Powers, like I said, 3, mythology 5, and Groot, since his early days, has really just absolutely blossomed. Recently, he's gotten his own comic, although that's no longer going, but he appears, of course, in the Guardians of the Galaxy comics. He appears in multiple crossover comics and is a main character. So, I mean, he's basically now one of the top most famous superheroes. And if I were to place a superhero on this list somehow, they would all get 5s because of all the stories and content that they've been through. So 5 for mythology. For Groot as well, of course, it is more back-ended with recent stories than a lot of stories happening throughout the years since he was created. Design 4, no matter who draws Groot, he almost always looks just freaking awesome. It could be the claw fingers, it could be the quote-unquote hairstyle he's sporting at the time. just super fun character, I'm sure, for people to draw. And I mean, who would ever maintain that a walking tree couldn't be cool looking? I don't think anybody would argue with Groot on that matter. And cultural impact, of course, is a 5. He's the main character in the movies, the Guardians and Avengers movies. He's been in, obviously, a ton of TV shows, all animated. Ultimate Spider-Man, Avengers Assemble, Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes, of course, the Guardians of the Galaxy television show, Hulk and the Agents of Smash, Marvel Superheroes, Adventures, and on film, of course, he is played by Vin Diesel, and later transforms into Baby Groot, although probably not the same character, actually. According to director James Gunn, that is a different Groot. So there might be a few different takes floating around there like that. He also has a quick cameo in Ralph Breaks the Internet, the movie, and appears in a ton of video games. Is a super powerful, super popular toy. And you also actually can see him in the trailer for the second season of The Mandalorian. I'm going to leave that there, see if you can find him. And he is also going to show up at the Guardians of the Galaxy rides for the Disney theme parks if you go out there and check those out. So he's got a total of 20, which of course leaves him safely at number 1. So we're not exactly 100% sure if the Groot that appears in Tales to Astonish 13 is the same Groot as the one that exists now. In some comics, he has admitted to being the same character. In some, he has insinuated that he is either a relative or an offspring. It hasn't really been cleared up. However, the very fact that it was Groot or his species, something like that, called himself Groot, is enough to make the link for me, and we will see if that question really gets answered. It seems to kind of be shifting from Marvel writer to writer. So perhaps we get a definitive answer someday. Perhaps we do not. Quick review of the top 10 Marvel monsters. Trel sits at number 10. Grog at 9. Oh, I never made the connection. Ulysses Bloodstone, who's one of the monster hunters in the Marvel Universe, has expressed his belief that Grog is actually from the same planet as Fin Fang Foom. Has not been confirmed, however. So, Grog is 9. 8 is Electro. 7 is Spragg. 6, Goon. 5, Orgo. 4, Xemnu, or the Hulk if you want to be old-fashioned. The zombie is number 3. Number 2, Fin Fang Foom. And number 1, I am Groot. So that's what we have for you this week. Next week, the plan is to look over the top 10 Thor villains from the 1960s. So until we get back to you with that, I'm sure you'll never guess who number 1's going to be. We will see you next time. Thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe, share with all your very best friends, because who wouldn't want to learn more about Groot? That's what you can use them. That's the argument you can use to convince people to watch the movies and watch this show too. That'd be great. So appreciate it. Have a wonderful day, everybody, and we will see you next time. Bum, bum, bum.